Hi, welcome to the Online Jewelry Academy. I'm Professor John R. and I'm your instructor. A big thank you to our patrons who have funded this video by supporting us through a monthly donation on Patreon. Now, if you like these videos and you want to support the production of future videos, why not sign up on Patreon and provide us with a small monthly donation? Or at least sign up and become a subscriber by clicking that button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Subscribers get notification on a weekly basis of new Online Jewelry Academy videos. And don't forget, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All right, so let's look over here at today's project. What I've got are pendants, and what I'm going to focus on is this top pendant, what I'm calling the Lotus pod pendant. You know how when lotus blossoms lose all their petals and the seed pod becomes dried out and has these cool holes in it? Well, that's what was my inspiration for this piece. Now, what's kind of cool about it is that it has a flat surface that's perforated with a variety of different size holes. And if I flip it up for you so you can see the back side, I've got a really cool texture on the back of this piece as well. Now, the way that it hangs from this piece of leather is I've just used a short segment of tubing. Below it, I've got another one that has a hammered finish, and on its backside, it's got a smooth surface with a different type of bale. This one is hidden on the backside, so you don't see it, and its color is complemented with an epoxy resin color that's similar to like a turquoise gemstone. Now this bottom one, it's utilizing even a different type of bale, and here we've got a hammered and sawed opening that gives sort of a starburst effect, and the texture is actually on the inside of this piece. And I've complemented the color again with sort of a blue clear resin, and you can sort of sneak a peek inside of it and see some bumps and lumps inside that give it a little bit of visual excitement. Now, if you want to jump ahead, you could make one of these pendants like I've done here and use it as the top surface of a split shank ring. And we have several videos in our playlist that show you how to make that type of ring. Okay, so let's move ahead and let me show you what you're going to need to do. Now, the first thing you want to do is put on your eye protection. Remember, you want to protect yourself in the studio. That way you're able to work for a lot longer. Okay, remember I have textured material incorporated into these pieces. Remember on the back of this one? So here's a sample of this textured material. What I did is I ran it through the rolling mill with a tool that I made in order to create this texture. Now, if you don't like this texture or you want to have one that's unique and all your own, we have a number of videos on our playlist that show you how to make some really cool textures. And by the way, this video is complemented with a playlist on our channel that gives you all of the supplemental videos that you need to see in order to bring you up to speed if you don't understand the tools, the techniques, or the vocabulary. Okay, so what I've got in front of me is a disc cutter that's loaded with a similar piece of material. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a disc similar to one of these. All I need to do is just put the cutting tool into it and take a hammer and just bang it out. And there we go. I just cut that piece out, and it's just a flat textured piece of metal. Now you can see here that I have two different backs. I've got one that's smooth and I've got one that's kind of textured on the backside, and then I have another one right here that has the texture on the interior. So I want to duplicate this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring out a hardwood dapping block. Now this is a great tool if you're trying to preserve a texture. So I'm going to put this into the dapping block with the texture facing up, and then I'll just take the tool that's used to strike the material, and all I have to do is just wrap it in several different locations. And there we go. I've got another version of this exact same type of disc. Now, I want to use this as the backing, and you can see that I've previously sanded the edge of this one so that it can meet up with the top plate to make a nicely closed kissing seam, so there'll be no gaps and no holes. But speaking of holes, if you're familiar with making hollow form pieces, you know that if you don't put a hole into a hollow form as you're soldering it, or before you solder it, it has the potential of exploding in your face, and you're way too pretty to have that happen. So be careful, and guess what? We're going to make a lot of holes on our top surface of our piece. So what I'm going to do is I've got another disc right here, completely plain. I want to prep it to have a variety of holes in it. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to take a center punch, and with your hammer, you're just going to make some kernels. A kernel is basically the center of a hole. It's right where things spring from. So I'm going to wrap this in several places, and I just want to give a variety of different positions. And you can put as many or as few holes as you want. You can organize them in a pattern. You can be totally random like I am. Or maybe you want to change the nature of the piece, and maybe you want to make it into something that has something to do with maybe your constellation associated with your astrological sign. Whatever you want to do. You're the artist. You decide. Okay, so once you've made all of those little kernels, then what you want to do is you want to drill through. And what I always recommend is that you start by drilling a pilot hole. A pilot hole is the smallest hole that you're going to make, and then you can expand from there. So what you do is load a small sized drill bit into your flex shaft and lock it in place using your chuck key. Then you can just go ahead and drill the holes. Be sure you wear your eye protection. Okay, so what I've done is I drilled all of the pilot holes, and then I went back with some drill bits that were slightly larger in order to create a variety of sizes of holes. Now, on the back side, you can probably feel some burrs. Now, you can eliminate those by just taking the largest drill bit that you have, and you just use your hands and just act like you are the flex shaft and like you're drilling. And what that does is it just knocks off that material off that surface. But guess what? That's going to be on the inside of your piece. Nobody's ever going to see it. So if you want to cheat and move ahead, you could. So I'm going to move this over here onto my charcoal block, and now I'm going to prep it for the soldering. And what I want to do first is I'm going to dip into my flux, and I'm going to apply a layer of flux, particularly around the outer edge of this disc. Now remember, flux is a great way to reduce oxidation while you're soldering, and it also is a wetting agent that helps the solder to flow into the seams. Okay, so we've got that flux applied, and now what I can do is I can pick up my backing plate and apply it to this surface. Now remember, the edge of this was flattened out with a piece of sandpaper, sanding that disc on a flat surface so that it makes a good contact. And you can see, because this disc was domed, it left a nice little edge, because by doming it became a little bit smaller. Okay, so let's pick this up, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to elevate it using pieces of bandsaw blade that have been bent, so that I'm creating something that almost looks like the top of your gas range. And I'll just place this piece on top, and this is done so that I can aim heat underneath the piece in order to surround it in heat so that it The solder comes to temperature uniformly and flows. Okay, so now I'm going to just apply my solder to that edge. And I'm going to use tweezers because it's just a little bit cleaner than dipping into the flux all the time. But you can use your flex brush if it's easier for you. Okay, I've placed all of my solder pallions on my piece. Now, a number of you have written in the comments section that you wanted to know the exact positioning of the solder in projects. What I always tell students is, if you cut your solder pallions uniformly to about 1 millimeter square, you're good if you place them about 3 millimeters apart from one another. Now, in many videos, you've seen me use this small butane torch, and you've asked me about this as well. I don't remember where I got it, but it was about $50 online. If you want a butane torch like this one, just be sure to check for one that can achieve a temperature of 1500 degrees Fahrenheit. And the OJA has a video about torch selection, and what I'm going to use for this project is the larger MAP gas torch because it's a bigger project and I've got steel incorporated into the process of soldering with these little bandsaw blade stilts, which are heat sinks, and they're going to grab heat. So I need a little bit more power to get this done. Okay, so I've got my solder pick handy. I've got everything ready, so let's light the torch and solder. Okay, so that went very quickly because we had a more powerful torch. Now what I want to do is take the piece and quench it. Now the tool's kind of stuck to it. Don't worry, it's not solder, it's probably just flux. Drop it in. Let's see. There we go. There's our piece, nice and soldered. Now I'm going to quench these other stilts just because I don't want to touch them accidentally and burn myself. Be sure you always quench your tools when you're done. All right, so you can see now, if I shake out some of the water, that we've got some great little holes on our surface. And remember, there's little bumps and dimples on the inside. So all I need to do now is do something to make it more wearable. Okay, so remember there was that edge. What I want to do is I want to file this edge a little bit to make it perfect, and then I'm going to apply a small piece of tubing to act as my bail. Okay, I've completed the filing and I have a nice edge to my piece now. You can see that. And I have a little bit of a silver blush on the surface of the copper, but that's not a problem. We can plate over that using spent pickle. So the next thing that I need to address is attaching a bail to the piece in order to make it a wearable object. Without the bail, you can't put a cord or a chain or anything through it to make it wearable. So this is a necessary component. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little piece of tubing, a large tubing, one that's big enough to accommodate the leather thong that I've used. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the edge of the pendant with some flux, and then I'll just bring the piece of tubing over to that. And now I can put some solder behind the tubing in order to solder it on. Now for this operation, I don't need as much power because I'm attaching just one small component to the larger component, so I'll be able to use the butane torch. So let's get a piece of solder or two back there. I'm using smaller pieces because I just want to slip them behind there. I'm having trouble picking that one up. There we go. Okay, so I'll light the torch. Remember, dry out the flux a little bit. I got my solder pick handy in case that tube wants to roll away. Okay, So I can turn off my torch and use my solder pick to pick up the piece. There it is. And quench it. Okay, so now this piece needs to be pickled again in order to remove all of the oxidation, and then I can do whatever I want to it in terms of colorizing it. Now, the Online Jewelry Academy has many videos on how to colorize pieces. You could add a patina to this, like I did here with the liver of sulfur, or you could maybe even colorize it with colored pencils, which is kind of interesting. It's up to you. Remember, you're the artist. Make it special and make it all your own. I hope you liked this project. There are plenty more like this one on our playlist on the onlinejewelryacademy.com. Thanks for watching.